Sabay tayo
The movie begins on a rainy night with a woman named Olivia standing near a grave where her dead daughter Annelle lies. Two men then appear from behind and begin covering Annelle's body with soil, but to Olivia's horror, Annelle's eyes open. As Olivia tries to move, roots sprout from the ground and entangle her feet, trapping her, and despite her frantic attempts to stop them, they continue burying Annelle. At that moment, Olivia abruptly wakes up, realizing it was all a dream. She approaches her ill daughter, Annelle, to check on her, and as Olivia sits in a chair beside her, Annelle asks, "Bad dream?" Olivia apologizes for waking her up, and Annelle shares a dream she had. She describes she was performing a concert at the Mall of Asia, with a huge crowd cheering and screaming her name. Later, a doctor informs Olivia that Annelle needs to stay in the hospital for a few weeks for observation. Olivia sits down in despair and says she doesn't have the money for that, to which the doctor apologizes, expressing that he wishes there was another option. He suggests moving Annelle to a lower-priced ward, but Olivia declines, explaining that the last time they shared a room, Annelle couldn't sleep, which worsened her condition. Olivia attends a job fair and applies for a position at a call center. However, the recruitment officer informs her that the fair is exclusively for students. Desperate, she explains that the past few months have been challenging for her and hands over her resume, insisting she is the hardest worker he will ever find. She then threatens him, saying she'll fight him if he plans on reporting her, as she has everything riding on this opportunity. Amused, the officer says he will overlook her threat because she speaks better English than anyone else who has applied. He schedules her for training the next day and asks if that works for her, to which Olivia quickly agrees and thanks him sincerely. The next evening, Olivia arrives at the Loro house, where the receptionist greets her warmly. Olivia mentions that it's her first day at LGO, and as she waits, her attention is drawn to several photos displayed on the wall. After a moment, the receptionist hands her an access card, saying the 4th floor. Olivia steps into the elevator and presses the button for the 4th floor, and as the elevator ascends, it suddenly stops at the 3rd floor. The door opens, and Olivia is taken aback to find the floor empty. She hesitantly peeks out and calls, "Is anybody there?" And just as she spots a shadow moving, the door quickly shuts. Next, Lance, the team manager, introduces himself as their trainer for the next 7 days and shares the history of Loro House. Originally a World War II settlement, it was later converted into a top hospital by Dr. Jane Loro in the 1970s, and then remodeled into their current office space. Lance notes that LGO occupies the only active floor, as others are under renovation, and advises caution while walking around. During the session, Mimi asks Olivia if she's her mentor, and Olivia explains she's also a trainee. Mimi admits she's only there for the training allowance and plans to find another BPO job later. When Olivia sits at her system, Karen asks which client she's assigned to. Olivia replies, "TSP bank card," and Karen says, "I'd like to know my outstanding balance," prompting Olivia to check, but Karen interrupts, saying, "You're too slow, so I'd like to cancel my credit card." Panicked, Olivia apologizes, explaining it's her first day, to which Karen snaps, "And it will be your last if you don't learn this system by the end of the day, and that goes for all of you." She then turns to Lance and says, "If they fail, it's on you." After she leaves, Mimi asks Lance, "Who was that?" He replies, "That's the COO of LGO," then reassures Olivia, promising to help her with the systems. The next morning, Olivia returns to the hospital, and as she lies down, the nightmare returns, where she's desperately trying to save Annelle. Later that evening, Mimi confides in Olivia that Vince has offered to pay for her master's program if she agrees to marry him soon, but she's unsure if she's ready. She asks Olivia for advice, but Olivia admits she might not be the best person to ask since she's never been married. Curious, Mimi asks, "But you have a child? And is it hard?" To which Olivia explains that raising a child is challenging, sharing that there's always a constant fear because their life depends on you. When Mimi asks what she means, Olivia reveals that her daughter has a congenital heart defect and needs surgery soon, but she doesn't have the money. She adds that the fear also gives her strength, saying, "When you're a mother, you can't say things like it's impossible. And even though it's been tough, every time I see Anel, it's worth it." Moved by Olivia's story, Mimi gets emotional and declares she's decided to stay at LGO. Later, while on a call, Olivia hears a child's voice saying hello. The customer asks if she has a kid with her, and confused, Olivia says she thought it was on his end and asks for his number. As he speaks, the child's voice repeats, and the customer, annoyed, says it's distracting and decides to call back later. Suddenly, the floor's lights go out, prompting Lance to reassure everyone, saying it looks like it'll take some time to fix the electrical issue. Lance then approaches Olivia and tells her that he heard about her daughter from HR. He mentions that he put in a good word for her with Karen to help speed up her regularization process. Olivia thanks him, and Lance adds, "But you're going to have to prove that you deserve it," and tells her that Karen will be keeping a closer eye on you. "But I believe in you." After Lance leaves, we see a girl standing at a distance, and suddenly, the lights flicker before coming back on. Olivia returns to her system, and Mimi informs her that a customer's card was double charged, causing him to be unable to make a purchase. He is now very angry and demanding to speak to a supervisor. Olivia calmly instructs Mimi to pass the call to her and tell the customer that she is the supervisor. Mimi hesitantly transfers the call, and as Olivia handles the call, Karen watches her from a distance. The next day, Lance asks Olivia if she pretended to be Mimi's supervisor during a call the night before. Olivia confirms and apologizes, explaining that she was just trying to help Mimi. Lance reveals that Karen listened to the recording and was impressed with how she handled the situation. He explains that the customer was the son of a VIP client, and Karen has decided to fast-track her employment status. He tells her that she is now a regular employee with all the company benefits. Overjoyed, she thanks Lance, who asks if she would like to celebrate. But Olivia apologizes, saying she needs to return to her daughter. Later, as Olivia is about to leave, a girl suddenly appears in front of her, and Olivia asks, "Are you here with someone?" The girl shakes her head in denial, to which Olivia introduces herself and asks for the girl's name. The girl replies, "Narissa," to which Olivia smiles and says, "That's a beautiful name," before suggesting they go downstairs, as someone might be looking for her. She extends her hand to Narissa, who gently reaches out and touches it. And at that moment, the lights in the entire building go out. Olivia quickly pulls out her phone and turns on the flashlight, then tells Narissa to follow her. Olivia and Narissa leave the building together, and Olivia asks, "Are you okay?" To which Narissa looks at her and smiles in response. Just then, a cab pulls up, and several people get out. But Narissa suddenly disappears into the crowd, leaving Olivia standing there in shock. The next scene shows Olivia sleeping beside Anel, when suddenly, Anel sits up, her body seemingly not under her control, and after a brief moment, she lies back down again, as if nothing happened. That evening, when Olivia returns to work, she finds that her access card isn't working. She goes to the receptionist and explains the issue, to which the receptionist checks the system and informs Olivia that she didn't tap out the previous night. Olivia explains that it was due to a brownout when she left, and the receptionist asks, "What time did you leave last night?" Olivia replies, "Around 4, and the receptionist tells her that there was no brownout at that time. Next, Olivia is on a call when she hears a disturbance in the background, and she realizes the voice calling for help is that of Narissa. She listens closely, but then a sudden scream jolts her. Lance asks if she's okay, to which she looks around and asks, "Can I take my break early?" And Lance tells her to take all the time she needs. Olivia checks her phone and sees 7 missed calls. She quickly calls the doctor, who tells her that something has happened to Anel, and asks if she can come. The call is then suddenly disrupted, and the phone disconnects. Panicked, Olivia rushes to the elevator and tries calling the doctor again. But as she does, the lights begin flickering, and the elevator door opens to the basement. Olivia frantically tries to close the door, but the buttons stop working. Desperate, she steps out into the basement to find another way out. She spots a gate, but as she approaches, she discovers it's chained shut. Just then, Olivia hears someone calling for help, and as she turns toward the sound, she spots a door, nailed shut with wooden planks. Perplexed, she moves closer, and suddenly the doorknob turns, and before she can react, someone bangs on the door and shouts, "Just die!" This sends Olivia into a panic, and she flees in fear. Olivia rushes to the hospital, where the doctor tells her that Anel had a seizure earlier, but something else happened afterward that he can't quite explain. Olivia asks, "What happened?" To which the doctor explains that when they checked her heartbeat after she calmed down, her abnormal heart murmur was gone. Olivia asks, "It just disappeared?" And the doctor says yes, like she never had it in the first place. Olivia embraces her daughter tightly, relief washing over her, and the doctor says, "We'll run some follow-up tests, and if everything checks out, she can go home in a couple of days." A couple of days later, as Olivia packs their belongings to go home, she hears Anel giggling in the washroom. Perplexed, Olivia approaches the door and cautiously opens it, and she finds Anel standing in front of the mirror, giggling and staring at her own reflection. Just then, a nurse enters the room with the medical bills, interrupting the moment. That evening, Olivia brings the bill to the company, where she is informed that they do not provide advances, even if a hospital bill is presented. Olivia isn't sure what to do, so she goes into the nap room, lies down on a bed, and falls asleep while deep in thought. She has the same nightmare again, but this time, someone pushes her, and she finds herself inside a building with a red thread tied around her, leading to a room. Suddenly, the thread is pulled, jolting her awake, and Lance asks if she's okay. He apologizes for earlier and offers her a check, which Olivia accepts, thanks him, and embraces him for his support. Lance holds her back and attempts to kiss her, but Olivia resists, asking what he is doing. Lance responds that it's okay, saying he locked the door, prompting Olivia to slap him, and when he tries to force himself on her, Olivia fights back, hits him, and manages to escape. The next day, Olivia and Anel return home, but Anel looks at the house as if she's seeing it for the first time. That night, Olivia has another nightmare in which she sees Lance, Karen, and everything else from her previous dream. She wakes up, only to be frightened again by Anel, who tells her she hears voices. Olivia asks, "What voices?" But Anel replies that she doesn't know and asks, "What's happening to me?" As Olivia approaches her, Anel pleads for help, saying, "I'm still there." Suddenly, Anel freezes, and when Olivia moves closer, Anel screams and runs away. Horrified, Olivia rushes to Anel's room, and to her shock, she finds Anel asleep in her bed. Confused, Olivia cautiously approaches and pulls back the blanket, causing Anel to wake up. Olivia reassures her, saying it was nothing, and tells her to go back to sleep. That evening, at the weekly meeting, Lance gives a shout-out to Olivia, announcing that he just heard the news that her daughter, who had been in the hospital, is finally home. Everyone congratulates her, and then Lance reveals that this week's top agent is Mimi. However, the group claims it's rigged. Mimi asks, "What's the prize this week?" And Lance responds, "How about a date with me?" Mimi says she has a boyfriend, to which Lance replies, "That's okay, because what happens in LGO stays in LGO." The next day, Olivia confides in Mimi about the incident, saying she wanted to tell the police, but ultimately chose to keep the check. Mimi is shocked to hear this, and when Olivia asks, "Am I a bad person for still taking the money?" Mimi reassures her, saying no, and the only bad person is Lance. That evening, Lance arrives at the office and presses the button for the 4th floor. However, after a short while, the elevator jolts and the door opens, revealing the basement instead. Confused, Lance steps in and walks towards the gate, only to find it's locked. Frustrated, he tries to open it and calls for help, but suddenly he hears someone giggling from behind the door. Perplexed and scared, he walks toward the door, but when he hears no sound for a long time, he turns to leave. However, as soon as he moves forward, a light turns on automatically. When he turns back, the light flickers on and off, and before he can make sense of what's happening, a figure appears behind him and strikes him, causing him to fall. The figure then moves closer and strangles him, using the strap of his bag to choke him, ultimately leading to his death. Later, when Olivia arrives at the office, she is shocked to find that Lance is dead. Karen addresses the group, expressing that they are all devastated by Lance's passing. However, knowing Lance, he would have wanted them to stay strong despite the tragedy. She then urges everyone, if they know anything about what might have happened to him, please speak to the police. James' lawyer then informs Karen that her father is going to pull the plug. Karen quickly rushes aside, and the man tells everyone to disregard everything Karen just said. He announces that, effective immediately, LGO will be temporarily closed while the investigation is ongoing, and reassures them that their salaries will be taken care of. The next day, Olivia finds Annelle watching the news about Lance's murder on TV, and to her shock, Olivia notices a sinister smile forming on Annelle's face as she tightly strangles her teddy bear. That evening, Olivia searches for information about the Loro house on the internet. She comes across an article, and when she looks at the photos, she is shocked to see Narissa in them. Curious, she then searches for child possession videos and clicks on one, which shows a priest performing an exorcism on a girl. The next day, Olivia tells Annelle that it's been a while since she last played her guitar and asks, "Can you play something for me?" Annelle sits with the guitar, but when Olivia calls her name, she doesn't respond. However, when Olivia calls her Narissa, Annelle looks up at her. Olivia asks, "Narissa, why are you doing this?" To which Narissa replies, "When I saw you, I remembered my mother, and I want to see her again." Olivia asks, "How could you do this to Annelle?" And Narissa responds, "You couldn't hear me before, so this was the only way." Olivia then asks, "What happened to you?" To which Narissa says, "I wanted to do this for a long time, but I couldn't get out until you finally brought me out." She continues, "My mother's name is Peara, and I really want to see her again." Olivia replies, "I don't know where your mother is." To which Narissa says, "I do, and I can feel her." Olivia then asks, "If I help you, will you let me and my daughter be?" To which Narissa agrees. Olivia asks Narissa about Lance, and Narissa angrily replies, "He was a bad person," squeezing Olivia's hand and asking, "Aren't you happy with what happened to him?" She insists, Lance was bad, like everyone there, ignoring Olivia's plea to let go. When Olivia calls her Annelle, she breaks down, crying. "What is happening to me?" Olivia reassures her, "I will fix this." Olivia shares everything with Mimi, telling her that it's fine if she doesn't believe what she's saying, to which Mimi responds that she does believe her, but she just needs some time to process everything. Olivia then turns to Annelle and calls her Narissa, and Narissa tells them to go straight. Scared, Mimi drives the car, following Narissa's instructions, and they eventually reach a location. Olivia tells Mimi, "Just stay here, as they have to go somewhere else after this." Narissa leads Olivia to a house, where Peara opens the door, and upon seeing her, Narissa calls out, "Mom!" and rushes to embrace her. Peara, looking confused, tells Annelle that she is not her mother, but when Annelle insists, saying, "I am Narissa," Peara is shocked. Peara tells Olivia, "I was just a regular employee at the hospital, and Narissa and I lived there because I didn't have a husband to look after her while I was at work." Then, one day, Narissa fell ill, and the doctor said that Narissa had tuberculosis and that she died. Narissa interrupts, saying, "That's not true." And Peara continues after that, "They banished me from the hospital, and to this day, I don't know why they fired me or why they took and hid Narissa from me." Narissa says, "They hurt and killed me," and Peara wonders why, saying they didn't do anything bad to them. To which Narissa says, "They're the ones who were bad." Olivia tells Peara that I promised Narissa I would bring you to where she is, and suggests if we can retrieve her remains, we'll all find peace. Meanwhile, Karen approaches her dad, asking, "Why did you shut me down?" James' lawyer hands her a laptop, and as she opens it, a video begins playing, and Karen is horrified as she sees Narissa's ghost in the video. James then tells his lawyer to leave them alone, and once he's gone, he gets up from his bed, makes a drink, and sits down in a chair. He tells Karen that while she knows the Loro house was once a tenement, what she doesn't know is how they dealt with the squatters. Most were thrown out before the hospital was built. He recalls how Peara, one of the squatters, begged him to let her stay, and he eventually hired her as maintenance staff. Peara never asked for anything except to remain in her old basement room. While Peara was always decent, her daughter, Narissa, was strange, and the whole building had an odd energy. Despite the hospital thriving, something was happening to the place and its people, like sickness, disappearances, and rumors of the building being cursed. But he didn't believe in such tales. He continues, revealing that Karen's mother had been friends with Peara and Narissa for years, and her kindness was what killed her, to which Karen interrupts, pointing out that he told her her mother got sick. In a flashback, Narissa is seen holding a knife to Karen's mother's throat, while James pleads for her to stop. But Narissa slits her throat, and in a fit of rage, James strangles Narissa to death. James continues, explaining that the family used all their influence to cover up the truth, and they told the police that Narissa and her mother had simply run away. But in reality, Narissa never left. He burned the room, but he admits he should have burned the entire building. He adds that he never should have allowed Karen to convince him to give her that place. Karen asks, "I don't understand. How could a child do this on her own?" To which James replies, "She didn't." Meanwhile, Olivia and Mimi, along with Peara and Anel, arrive at the Loro house building. However, Karen watches through the CCTV cameras as they try to enter the building. They enter the basement room, only to be shocked when they find that Narissa's body is no longer there. Frustrated, Olivia pulls Anel aside and asks Narissa, "Where is her body?" But when she remains quiet, Mimi expresses a bad feeling about the place. Peara says, "You don't have to be afraid." And as they turn, Peara suddenly pulls out a knife and stabs Mimi, sending Olivia into shock. She watches in horror as Peara continues stabbing Mimi repeatedly, ultimately killing her. And as Mimi collapses to the floor, Peara turns toward Olivia, who pleads for mercy. Peara moves closer, and just as Olivia braces for the worst, Narissa unexpectedly pushes Olivia, and Peara knocks Olivia unconscious. After a while, when Olivia regains consciousness, she finds herself restrained on a table, and she asks Narissa, "Why are you doing this?" Narissa replies, "At last, we can finally do it." And when Olivia asks, "Do what?" Narissa responds, "What was never finished." Peara approaches Olivia, chanting something, and reveals a ball of thread. She says, "This is where it started, and this is where it shall continue." She goes on, "I am old and weak, while you are beautiful and strong." Then, she lifts Olivia's shirt and stabs a needle into her stomach, causing her to scream in pain. Olivia, horrified, asks, "Why are you doing this?" To which Peara coldly replies, "You are next," and stabs another needle into her stomach as the screen fades to black. Now, when Olivia wakes up, she finds herself wrapped in the thread, surrounded by other women who seem to have suffered the same fate at Pearla's hands. And before Olivia can process what's happening, a ghost suddenly appears beside her and pounces on her and clings tightly to her. At that moment, Karen burst into the basement room and struck Pearla with an object, dislodging the needle from Olivia's stomach and causing her to regain consciousness. Karen then quickly frees Olivia, while Anel, overwhelmed and confused, screams and runs away. Karen urges Olivia to leave and stays behind, determined to confront Pearla. Olivia follows Anel to the third floor, where Narissa suddenly ambushes her, causing her to fall. And then she begins hitting Olivia, who manages to grab her hands and tells her to stop. However, Narissa scratches her face. Enraged, Olivia throws Narissa aside, prompting Narissa to flee. Olivia gets up and starts searching for Narissa, eventually finding her crying in a corner, muttering, "Leave me alone," before smashing her head against a glass panel. Concerned, Olivia tries to approach her, but Narissa grabs a shard of glass and presses it against her neck. Suddenly, Anel regains her senses, and Olivia tells her not to let Narissa do it. Narissa, however, overpowers Anel and threatens to kill her, to which Olivia warns Narissa that if you kill Anel, you will die too. Narissa says, "I just want my mother," to which Olivia responds, "Your mother is gone," and tells her to leave and give me back my daughter. Narissa lowers the glass shard, but suddenly she begins cutting her forehead. Alarmed, Olivia rushes forward to stop her and then knocks her to the ground. Olivia reassures Anel, "I'm always here." However, Narissa attempts to attack again, but Olivia overpowers her. Straddling Narissa, she begins to strangle her, pleading, "Go away!" After a moment, Anel begins to cry, causing Olivia to loosen her grip. But Anel says, "Kill me, and I will always be here." Olivia hesitates, torn by the plea, and when Anel adds, "I'm tired," Olivia, overcome with emotion, tightens her grip and strangles her. And as Anel dies, a flashback of Olivia's nightmare unfolds, showing her burying Anel under a layer of soil. Realizing what she has done, Olivia frantically tries to wake Anel, and after a tense moment, Anel suddenly gasps awake, prompting Olivia to quickly embrace her, tears streaming down her face, as she repeatedly apologizes. And at that moment, Karen also comes there. At the hospital, Karen asks Olivia about Annelle's condition, and Olivia responds that she is stable, but her heart is weak, explaining that it came back after Narissa left her body. Karen expresses her sorrow for both Annelle and Mimi, and Olivia reflects, saying, "After everything that's happened, here we are again." Karen reassures her, saying, "You don't have to worry about anything, and I'll take care of everything." And she also assures Olivia that Annelle is going to be fine. As they head to speak with the police, a nurse accidentally bumps into Karen just as they are entering the elevator. Once inside, Olivia notices a thread ball lying outside and suddenly realizes that the person with her isn't Karen but Perla, who reassures Olivia, saying, "Believe me, everything will be fine." And the movie ends here.